I'm sure you've seen some kind of video or promo, commercial, or rap song telling you to go get vaccinated. The latest comes from Vulture. Just listen to Juvenile and vax that thing up already. Okay? The problem I have with all of this is that these people don't know about your health. And I don't like pharmaceutical commercials either. I've actually complained about them. And strangely, the left used to. They don't really do that anymore. We used to complain that you get these commercials where they're like, is Sonafonal right for you? Go to your doctor. And it's like, no. I mean, at the very least, at least those commercials tell you to go talk to your doctor. But you get these pharmaceutical companies advertising medications like, I'm not going to name any of the medications, but they do these commercials. And we hear from all these people in these countries with universal health care saying that's absurd, that their countries would never do that. They don't have this industry. The advertising goes to the doctors, I suppose. Now all those arguments are gone. The left doesn't care about any of that. And here's where I stand. You should talk to a medical professional about your medical history and make determinations to get advice and make determinations on what you should be doing. We should not have people going door to door or making rap songs telling you to take some kind of medication when you don't even know if it's right for you. That includes commercials. That includes this weird propaganda. And that includes where we're at right now. From timcast.com, Biden says they will be going door to door visiting Americans who have not been vaccinated. Now y'all getting creepy. Look, I understand the arguments for getting everybody vaccinated, but I think a lot of the conversation is not being had because of censorship. And one of the important things that needs to be said is we've seen polling showing that many people got the first dose and did not complete their second dose. That means they're not fully vaccinated. Some people haven't gotten any doses at all. And this may be very, very simple. You go to the doctor and they say, they based on your medical history, they're going to give you specific medical advice that doesn't include the vaccine. Well, I recently spoke with someone who said they went to the doctor. Doctor advised them to get it based on their history. They got it, a little bit older individual, and had a bad reaction. The doctor said, don't follow up. Is it possible that we see this polling about people not following up because their doctors told them not to? The problem I have with these big campaigns is that they're ignoring the fact that you should not be getting advice from Juvenile, of all people, to vax that thing up. It's just absurd. I'm sorry, it is. Here's the latest news. Cassandra Fairbanks writes, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki announced on Tuesday that the White House is organizing an effort to go door to door and visit unvaccinated Americans. President Joe Biden also discussed the new educational campaign while giving a speech on Tuesday. The administration missed their goal of getting 70% of adults at least one shot by the 4th of July. We are continuing to wind down the mass vaccination sites that did so much in the spring. Now we need to go to community by community, neighborhood by neighborhood, and oftentimes door to door, literally knocking on doors to get help for the remaining people protected from the virus, Biden said. Yahoo News reports that the Biden administration will redouble its efforts to chip away at doubt about the vaccines by partnering with about 42,000 local pharmacies and primary care physicians' offices, where people feel most comfortable receiving medical advice. The administration will also boost access to the shots at pediatricians' offices for children 12 to 15 needing physical exams before returning to school in the fall. Psaki said they will be doing targeted community by community, door to door outreach during Tuesday's press briefings. Now, I want to just stress, they say they want to redouble their efforts to chip away at doubt. I think a lot of people just haven't gotten the vaccine because they don't care. I mean that's really it. I guess the idea of these propaganda campaigns, these PR campaigns, these ad campaigns is to at the very least get you to go and talk to a doctor about this or a medical professional. I think you should. I absolutely think you should. I think you've got to be careful about partisan plays in the media, and it's tough. I can't pretend to have all the answers, and I can't pretend to give you anything other than the basic advice of talking to a doctor. This is why I fall on the side of you can hear something in the media, be it for the vaccine or against or whatever, but really it's got to come down to you talking to your trusted advisors and making your decisions for yourselves. I say that because I genuinely mean it. I also want to add YouTube basically mandates it when talking about this stuff. But let me explain something about the media. The Jerusalem Post says 4 cases of Delta plus coronavirus strain found in Israel. Scientists are still investigating if the mutation is more contagious or deadlier than its Delta predecessor. Delta Plus. Here we go. Here's what I'm worried about. The media is driven by fear and rage. The media wants to get you whipped up into a frenzy. Maybe not intentionally. I don't think the writer of every single article is saying, like, how can I make people lose their minds? They may just be seeing a story and saying, like, whoa, this is really important. We should probably tell people about it. Delta Plus, they say. How much of what's going on is rooted in media frenzy? They see these stories, they sound bad, they report it, other outlets pick it up, a game of telephone is played, and then the story gets all mangled up. How much of it is legitimate and real? This is the challenge that I think we're facing, especially. There are a lot of people who don't trust the media. I'm one of them. I don't trust the media. I try very hard to make sure I'm looking at a variety of sources to figure out what's true and what isn't. But you also need to understand that there are people who hate the media, and that bias will translate into telling you things that might not be true. And there's an argument between Brett Weinstein and Claire Lehman of Quillette over ivermectin and the vaccines that I think it's important to go through. Of course, I run the risk of getting banned whenever I talk about this, so you should just know that. And when it comes to the Delta Plus variant, there's two things to consider. The media may have found some small story that they're running with to get clicks. It may be a serious threat, honestly. How do we find out? How do we know? The challenge with the pandemic over the past year has been the rapidity, the rapidness, whatever the word is, by which this has all taken place. So when we're hoping that our medical institutions can stay up to date with the current literature and know exactly what to do in the event of this pandemic, we're hoping that our information is traveling faster than developments with the virus. You see the challenge here? When news breaks of the Delta Plus variant, and they say the Delta strain was already more infectious, what research do we have? Will that travel to the medical institutions? Will that go through some kind of review process? And will we get certified information that can be used in a clinical process? I don't know. That's the challenge. Because if the information is coming out in the press and then doctors are reacting just to the press, well, that's a problem, isn't it? The Jerusalem Post says 4 cases of Delta Plus, a new and potentially more dangerous variant, have been discovered in Israel. Delta Plus is a variant of the Delta strain, which is already known to be 50% more infectious than the previous Alpha British variant, and is responsible for the majority of new cases in the country with an additional mutation. I do think it's funny that they're not using Alpha, Delta, etc. Quote, if the original strain was contagious after spending 15 minutes near a sick person, now it is theoretically even less. Professor Cyril Cohen, head of the immunology lab at Bar Ilan University, told the Post. The Delta Plus variant could be even more contagious than its Delta predecessor, he said. Though he said that it is still unclear whether the variant causes more serious disease or evades the vaccines more than other strains. Quote, it is a bit early to consider it worse than the original Delta, which is already problematic enough. In India, they are saying it is a bit more contagious, perhaps only to certain populations, but we still don't have any strong evidence. He said that as of last week, only a few hundred cases of Delta Plus had been reported worldwide. You see, that's my point. There's only a few cases. Is it really something that we should be worried about? This is the challenge. I can't tell you yes or no. I really can't. Did we find something early? Can we preempt it and do something about it? Perhaps. Are we overreacting too early? Yeah, perhaps as well. Would locking everything down potentially make things worse? Really? Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I will tell you, the CDC has said that if you are vaccinated, you don't need to be wearing masks and worrying about the Delta variant. But in Israel, they did a study and found that with the Delta variant, I believe it's Pfizer, is less effective. I think in the US, it was around like 90 or so percent. Israel found it to be about 64% effective. And many people who have been vaccinated are still getting COVID, but they're not getting symptoms. So it's still spreading. They say, Cohen said one can think about the spike protein being built with thousands of small bricks. A mutation causes a change to one or more of the bricks and impacts the way the spike protein functions. Sometimes the changes are minimal. Other times they give the virus an evolutionary advantage, such as allowing it to attach to our cells better, evading the immune response of someone vaccinated or recovered, or it could cause more severe disease. Look at that. Someone who is vaccinated could still get a variant. Until now, mutations have occurred on a limited set of bricks, meaning there have only been about 5 or 6 changes of consequence and various combinations of those changes, something that Cohen said is good news. When thinking about updating the vaccine, we don't need to work on many versions of the vaccine, but only versions that can cover most of the mutations because there are not a lot. But he admitted that Israel might not always readily detect new variants now. As more people are diagnosed with COVID each day, That's because the standard PCR tests that are used at the airport or by the health funds do not check for variants. They simply supply a positive or negative answer. To see what strain of COVID someone is infected with requires genetic screening, which he said takes longer and is more expensive than standard testing. When there were only a few new cases per day, the health ministry was sequencing all positive cases. However, with so many new people being infected, the ministry has had to be more selective. On a personal level, sequencing might not always be needed, but it is important to see what variants are circulating on a public health level, Cohen said. Well, look, like I said, this is going to come down to you talking to a medical professional. Forgive me for saying it so often, but I do think it's important because I'm trying to counteract all of it. Okay, there's propaganda in the media, there's propaganda online, and everybody's muddying up your view of facts. Don't just think that, your side is the right side. You want a neutral view, which means you probably want to get a couple of different opinions from medical professionals. Let's take a look at where we're at right now. Claire Lehman of Quillette has been arguing with Brett Weinstein. Brett Weinstein, of course, has advocated for Ivermectin. Ivermectin is not approved by the FDA. It's not recommended in any official capacity in the U.S. as a treatment of COVID-19. But there is right now an Oxford study that's promising. An Oxford study says that it may be effective. However, I must stress, it is not approved. And I actually, again, I'll say it for the 50 millionth time, bro. We've talked to people who mentioned like eating horse paste no, come on. You don't want to do any of that stuff. You need a trusted medical practitioner who knows your history. What worries me is, I interviewed Dr. Chris Martinson. He mentioned, horse paste, which is ivermectin. And I'm just like, bro, you don't know if you have an allergy. You don't know if there's something that counterindicated for taking this medication. That's why I'm very much like, I'll put it this way. I went and got some antibiotics a while ago, like a year or two ago. And one of them I looked at and I'm just like, look, I'm going to ask the doctor for their best recommendation because I'm not an expert in this. And one of them they gave me had like some side effects I didn't like. And I told them and they said, okay, don't worry about it. We'll give you something else. There's like that. The side effects were, they were just side effects. I'll put it that way. And most medications have side effects, including vaccines. So I talked to a couple different clinics and got their opinions, and their opinions varied a little bit. The point is, you can still assume responsibility for what they're handing you and say, hey, I don't like this. Is there anything else? Right now, when it comes to ivermectin, there's a lot of people who are saying it's Brett Weinstein, for instance, has taken some, he's touted it. I'm not going to tell anybody, I'm not going to recommend anything. I absolutely don't think so. My fear is that even though there have been studies on this and it's used in animals and it's for like deworming, let's say that you're prescribed a medication that might have an adverse reaction combined with something. That's why you go to a doctor, because they might be like, when you go to a doctor, they ask you, are you on any medication? It's like, yes, I take this allergy medication. They might be like, oh, wow, you can't do this then. You really got to know that stuff. That's why I'm not a fan of anybody coming out and being like, just go to the 7-Eleven, get a vaccine. I'm like, bro. And that's why I'm not a fan necessarily of, anybody saying alternative treatments, whatever. I think it's got to come from a prescription. I don't like this, this stuff. But here's what we got, right? So let me show you this statement from Claire Lehman on vaccines and ivermectin. She posted this to Quillette's forum saying, I just don't see, okay, let me just read. I just don't see how this is such a complex issue. It's just about quality of available evidence. We have randomized controlled trials with huge sample sizes, which demonstrate the efficacy and safety of the vaccines. And the mRNA vaccines have been proven safer than the others. We have a range of RCTs, which demonstrate the efficacy of IVM, but they are not highly powered and are of mixed quality. I interviewed Dr. Chris Martinson. He told me that one of the studies on ivermectin, there was a study on ivermectin that said it was not effective. It didn't do anything. He said that was a flawed study. Now, I think he's a smart fellow. I respect him. And I said, it's a flaw. So, okay. Then I pulled up another, he mentioned a study that was done that said good things about ivermectin. I pulled up another fact check saying it was a clinical review saying that the methodology was bad. And he said, oh, well, of course they'll say that. And I'm like, but you said that about the other study. So perhaps there is a grand conspiracy, or perhaps the only thing I can do when I pull up the literature is see some says no good use, some says some positive use. And I say, now I just shrug. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. Here's what I can say. They're different. Ivermectin and vaccines are different things. Stop. Claire is kind of acting like they're the same thing, and I think it's strange. I think she's right about the vaccine. The trials have shown that they're safer. There are issues. There are things reported in VAERS. That's going to be up to you to review and determine what is right for you. If someone says go bungee jumping and you're like, well, they told me I'd be fine, and then they measure the bungee wrong, it's like, well, dude, ultimately you make the choices. But Claire's right about this, at least in terms of the initial the argument. I'm concerned, however, that there is suppression of the actual debate. I also think there's absolutists, maximalists on certain issues that I don't agree with. You might say, Tim, you're being a milquetoast fence sitter. And I'm more just like, bro, give me the evidence. That's all I need. I need hard proof of things. And if I see a study saying ivermectin no good and ivermectin may be good, then I'm like, okay, we shouldn't censor that conversation. And it's very difficult for me to even get into this stuff because I could get banned for even saying what I said. Right now, Oxford has a study saying may be effective. That's the best I can do. There's a few other studies that have said something similar. Until there is an official confirmation and more data on this, I don't know what else to tell you. I can tell you that we are in an interesting position where, vaccines are brand new as well. So right now you have emergency use authorization, and this is what's kind of sparking up a lot of the controversy. If the vaccines are new, the mRNA vaccines are new, and there are potential risks, many people are wondering why they can't just take other medications. And I'll tell you this. If you have a doctor who prescribes you something, you're good to go. I'll stress that last point I made. You might have an allergy. You might have a medication that's stopping you from getting the vaccine or taking any other medication, be it hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, whatever. That's why you go to a doctor and you ask for their advice. And you can't come and say, oh, but my doctor is dumb. It's like, then talk to a different doctor who's not dumb. All right, but let's read a little bit more. Claire says, I don't see any evidence of suppression of this data. If one looks up clinicaltrials.gov, one can easily find dozens of studies investigating ivermectin for COVID. That is true. Google Scholar is not suppressing anything. All of this is easily searchable in academic databases. This recent review takes a look at the currently available evidence and concludes that, as of this writing, there are at least 5 large placebo-controlled clinical trials on the use of ivermectin for COVID-19 underway that should be powered to allay residual concerns about the available data. Until those data are released, ivermectin might be best considered an extremely promising therapy, but not one quite ready for public use. Otherwise, there's a real risk that the scientific community will once again be bitten by overenthusiasm and forced to answer to a public that will not be shy about holding us to account. Claire says, I have no problem with advocating ivermectin as a stopgap in the countries where the vaccines are not available. The problem is advocating it as a substitute to the interventions that we know work and are, according to the available statistics, safe for most people. I agree with that. Absolutely. But ultimately, I just put it this way. You can't come to me and expect me to know all the research. You can't come to me and expect me to read 53 research studies. That's why you're allowed to say, Tim, you are dumb and don't know what you're talking about. Guilty as charged. I am not a scientist. I am not a doctor, and I will not give anybody advice or recommend anything. I think the problem we're facing, though, is that there is a political block in terms of people just talking about it. I can respect YouTube saying people shouldn't be giving medical advice. I can't respect them banning people like Crowder, taking his video down for talking about CDC data. That makes it very difficult. I know. I run the risk of getting banned simply for bringing this stuff up. Now, here's what I can't defend Claire on. Brett Weinstein said that the vaccine strategy could make the pandemic worse. I don't know exactly to what he's referring to, but I think people are saying that because not enough people are getting vaccinated, there's variant strains that are possible. They're emerging because some people have vaccines and some people don't. The people who don't are transmitting COVID-19. And then as it mutates, it latches onto somebody who's got the vaccine and then propagates, and then it causes a problem. Claire claimed that Brett Weinstein said the vaccines themselves make the pandemic worse. I think that's wrong. That is Newmaning to the 10th degree. Brett Weinstein did not say that. However, here we go. Claire Lehman says science isn't conducted over podcast. Neither of us is qualified to even have an opinion on the issue. Seriously. Brett's response. Science is a method, Claire. It works in forests, labs, classrooms, space stations, wherever it is applied. I'm an evolutionary biologist. This is not a requirement to have an informed opinion, but if you're going to insist on such a standard, then yes, I am qualified. Claire says you are not qualified to contradict the published research via podcast. If you are so sure of your expertise and the veracity of your claims, then follow the normal scientific process. Write your hypotheses down, test them, and share your method with the world. Once again, a bit duplicitous. That is not the normal scientific process. When a study emerges, it goes to peer review, which means individuals in the scientific community in a similar field are given the research to review and then give their opinions on it. They don't all do a bunch of experiments. Now, perhaps they do, but I'm not familiar with that. I actually looked up the peer review process. Peer review is people looking over the research and checking to see if it makes sense. And there you go. Asking Brett himself to propose a hypothesis, test them, and then share his method would be for him to do an outright new study. If Brett Weinstein, an evolutionary biologist, wants to assess the available data, he is allowed to. Granted, I think there are many studies that say good things and many that say bad things, so I don't completely agree with Brett Weinstein, although I have to admit, I'm not an evolutionary biologist. So you know what? Hey, take it up with your family practitioner or whatever. My response was, that's not the normal scientific process. Brett isn't engaging in typical peer review, but I would say an evolutionary biologist discussing his review of existing research is well within the bounds of acceptable. Why does YouTube ban some studies, but not others? That's right. I, as I mentioned, run the risk of getting banned. I've reached out to Google and they said, here are the specific things you have to say in order to be allowed to talk about this. Here are the specific things you just can't say, period. I'm like, okay, well, I don't need to, I don't necessarily want to say the exact same things as Brett anyway, but there's a problem. I can't even tell you what Brett said for the most part. And I think that's stupid. And I have a tweet about it. I don't even know if I can read you the joke tweet. I don't think I can, but just think about this. People are getting medical procedures, albeit small ones, it's a vaccine, done by strangers in bars while they're drunk in order to win $1 million. That is insane. Sorry, I'm going to say it. You want me, YouTube, you say in the rules, make sure you don't discourage people from seeing their doctor and you advise them to go see a doctor. Oh, absolutely. But could you imagine, can you imagine the absolute psychosis of being drunk in a bar and someone walking up to you with a needle and saying, you ready? I'm going to inject you with this. They're not doctors in some instances. Some of them are doctors, but they're not your doctor. They don't know what you've been through. They don't know what medications you're on. So this is my problem, that you have this double standard where Juvenile can come out and tell you to vax that thing up, that the Biden administration will go door to door. Yet you cannot question in any way that you actually are allowed to talk about the advocacy of strangers injecting. There's a video of some guy in a 7-Eleven. And these like army guys walk in and they ask the 7-Eleven guy to get vaccinated and they do it right there on the spot. I'm like, yo, how is YouTube allowing that? How is YouTube allowing people to advocate for that? That blows my mind. That's why I advocate for one thing. I legitimately and genuinely believe it. I ain't going to go to a plumber and ask him to build a house. I'm not going to go to a carpenter and ask him to fix my toilet. And when it comes to my health and issues, I can only hope that the doctors I go to are good at what they do. That's about it. This whole thing is dumb. Mostly the censorship. That's what I mean. That we can't have these real conversations that need to happen. The censorship of Brett Weinstein is wrong. Even though I don't think he's a medical doctor and he shouldn't be recommending medical treatments to individuals, I think in this instance, he's not. He's talking about the research. But whatever. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.